Princess Gisla had always hated Rollo and resisted their marriage. However, over time, Princess Gisla found herself falling madly in love with Rollo. Rollo conveyed his desire to learn the Frankish language to Count Odo using sign language. Count Odo understood what he meant, so Rollo began to learn the language of their country. However, learning was more challenging for Rollo than fighting. When he encountered difficulties, he became violent towards his teacher. It didn't take long for Princess Gisla to invite the Archbishop to prepare to declare their marriage invalid. Moreover, the clergyman mocked Rollo for not understanding French. Unexpectedly, Rollo had learned French. To everyone's surprise, Rollo communicated in French that he understood their language. He said that he and Princess Gisla were destined to be together, and that his determination to defend Paris was the same as that of the princess. Then, Rollo said that he had massacred his own people and even took off his warrior bracelet. At this point, Princess Gisla's attitude toward Rollo started changing. The two soon got together, and Rollo also made the princess unable to extricate herself. Even when people were dining, ambiguous noises could be heard coming from their room. Aethelwulf returned to Wessex with Quenthrith. In his effort to save Quenthrith, he nearly lost his life. Their relationship had changed after the events they experienced together. King Ecbert invited Aella for a discussion regarding the authority in Mercia. Quenthrith hoped that the two kings could join forces to help her regain the throne, but Aella was unwilling to do this because Quenthrith gave birth to Ragnar's child. Aella had an ongoing feud with Ragnar and had vowed to kill him.
And would you kill his bastard son as well?
After the council meeting, King Ecbert hosted a feast for everyone. Aethelwulf and Quenthrith acted intimately, and King Ecbert was also close with Judith. Seeing this made Aella furious. Ragnar was taking a bath, attended to by Yidu, a slave that Aslog had recently purchased. Her clumsy demeanor sparked Ragnar's interest, and all this was seen by Aslog. Today marks the Vikings' grand festival, Winter Solstice. People light bonfires to pray for warmth and light. Following the celebration, Aslaug asked Ragnar if he wanted to be alone with the maidservant.
If that is what you want, I want to show you something.
Ragnar took Yidu to his secret base and told her that she could come and go freely. Here, he confides his pain to her. Thus, Yidu gave him a herb to ingest, and Ragnar began to relax after taking it. Everyone was celebrating, but only Bjorn faced danger. Bjorn didn't expect to encounter a killer in the uninhabited northern wasteland. He was unaware that the person before him was an assassin sent by Kalf and Erlendur. His movements were agile and fast, and he disappeared in the blink of an eye, demonstrating his extraordinary strength. Bjorn searched around intently, but the killer appeared behind him again. Luckily, Bjorn reacted in time and blocked the attacker's assault and counterattacked. However, the killer's sword attacks had a greater range. Bjorn's face was scratched. He could only try his best to avoid the opponent's attack, and the killer disappeared from sight again. The assassin seemed to have no hurry to end the fight, possibly toying with Bjorn. But Bjorn was not the type to back down. When he saw the fishhooks, he immediately came up with a countermeasure. He tied all the fishhooks to a rope. He then concealed himself and waited for the right moment. When the killer reappeared, Bjorn threw a broken axe at him and simultaneously stabbed him with a dagger. When the killer didn't move, Bjorn threw the fishhook at him. Bjorn completely controlled the berserker, removing his dagger and ring. However, despite his attempts, the berserker didn't reveal any information. Things were not over yet. Bjorn's appearance made Kalf and Erlendur wary. They thought the berserker might have failed. Only after Bjorn publicly stated his purpose did they realize their identities were not exposed. Bjorn came here to visit his mother and also wanted to take Torvi away. The atmosphere in the room became tense again. Upon seeing this, Kalf proposed to let Torvi choose whether to stay or not. She chooses to follow Bjorn, but Erlendur wants to keep her child, which makes her very painful. Lagertha comforted Torvi, promising to care for her child and urged her to leave without worries. At the same time, a group of strangers appeared in Kattegat, and the leader claimed to be King Harald, which made Aslaug alert. Nonetheless, she opted to host these visitors. Harald was verbose, expressing admiration for Ragnar's fame in the West, asserting that it was his motivation to come. However, Aslaug was unmoved by his words. She knew that Harald's visit must have more to it than that. Harald confessed that his ambition to become the king of Norway was to win over a princess he adored. Bjorn overheard this. Aslaug reminded Harald that aspiring to be king of all of Norway meant competing against Ragnar. Because of her herbal medicine, Yidu successfully got rid of his status as a slave and received special treatment from Ragnar. He frequently brought her to the cabin, and Aslaug silently condoned these actions. But Aslaug had her own plans and brought Ivar to Floki's house. Because Floki hated Christianity so much, she firmly believed that only Floki could educate her children to become true Vikings. Ivar proved to be ruthless, reacting violently when someone took his toys. With Aslaug's endorsement, he faced no repercussions. At this time, Ragnar was preparing to go to Paris. Neither he nor Bjorn believed Harald. Harald informed Bjorn that his brother Halfdan had already set off leading a large force and would soon join them for the raid in Paris. It wasn't long before Halfdan arrived with their fleet in Kattegat, eagerly inquiring about Ragnar's plans to attack Paris. Their objective was clear: invade Paris and slaughter the Christians. However, Ragnar told them that everything had to wait for the right time. The night fell, and the Vikings gathered in cheer and mirth. On the roof, Ragnar and Yidu poured out their hearts to each other. Ragnar said that he was tired of the days of constant fighting, and his heart was filled with guilt. After all, the people he left behind in England were slaughtered. Yidu confessed her life experience to him. At that moment, Floki and his wife entered the banquet, and the raucous atmosphere instantly quietened. Everybody knew about the dispute between him and Ragnar, hence kept their distance. This piqued the interest of the Harald brothers. They asked Floki about the reason for his fallout with Ragnar. Floki admitted it was because he murdered Ragnar's Christian pet. As the Vikings plotted their attack on Paris, Parisians were busy contesting for power. Princess Gisela, now besotted by Rollo, constantly sought to extend his influence. Her first target was Count Odo. However, Roland found the king first. He bluntly pointed out Count Odo's ambitions and brought a witness before the king of Paris, who happened to be his sister. Hearing a confirmed response from Therese, the king was taken aback. So he asked Roland to stay with Count Odo and report any developments to him at any time. At that moment, Rollo was discussing the defense of Paris with Count Odo. He knew Ragnar would soon attack Paris and would bring a bigger force. On the matter of helping Quenthrith reclaim her throne, Aethelwulf firmly supported her proposal. He agreed with Wessex and Northumbria to jointly send troops to seize control. One night, Aethelwulf and Judith chose to come clean. Aethelwulf revealed his wife's relationship with King Ecbert, and Judith also revealed what happened between him and Quenthrith. Then Judith came to King Ecbert and told him that Aethelwulf already knew about their relationship. Seeing this, King Ecbert openly proposed to Judith, even offering her a queen's ring. In addition, King Ecbert also made an unconventional decision. He sent Alfred on a pilgrimage to Rome and asked Aethelwulf to accompany him. Lagertha was exquisitely adorned with a wreath of flowers and a blue dress, her smile radiant like blooming spring flowers. Calf was deeply infatuated with her and immediately proposed to Lagertha after learning about her pregnancy. Their wedding was set to take place that day. However, during their intimate moment, Lagertha pulled out a dagger from her sleeve. Seeing the bride walk out alone, everyone was left baffled. It wasn't until someone shouted, "Long live Earl Ingstad," that everyone understood what was happening. When Erlendur asked Lagertha why, Lagertha told him that she would get back what she lost no matter what. In the end, Erlendur chose to stay by Lagertha's side, joining Ragnar in the raid on Paris. At this time, Ragnar became dependent on herbal medicine, so he took Yidu with him to Paris. Soon, with the Viking fleet fully gathered, an even larger force set off once again. Ragnar took Ubi and Hvitserk on this challenging journey. They encountered a storm halfway, and all the ships lost their way. After some search, they found Lagertha and Harald's ships. They arrived first at the mouth of the Seine, but to their surprise, the Frankish watchmen were camping in the woods. Vikings silently docked their ships, then stealthily approached their position. As expected, the Parisian soldiers were suddenly attacked, but one soldier escaped. They tied one of the prisoners to a wooden board. Ubi and Hvitserk were curious about it. Ragnar told them that this was to guide the lost ships. Sure enough, it didn't take long for the soldier who was tied to the wooden board to see the Viking fleet. While cleaning the battlefield, Torvi went to Lagertha to ask about his son. Erlendur noticed this interaction and rushed over, threatening Torvi that he would harm her son unless she kills Bjorn. At this time, Bjorn discovered the Franks' beacon fire, and news of their invasion would soon reach Paris. It infuriated the Harald brothers, who quickly captured some prisoners and began to torture them. But Floki intends to follow them. He says that Harald is his friend, but Helga reminds Floki that Ragnar is his friend. But Floki didn't seem to care, which left Helga at a loss. Having ingrained the nightmare of the water drop torture, he was the first to run up to the beacon and set it alight. Their actions shocked Bjorn, and their screams excited the Harald brothers. Upon hearing of a possible Viking attack, King Charles began to feel anxious. Count Odo, however, affirmed that he was prepared and willing to die defending his land. Yet, King Charles ignored his determination, placing his hopes on Rollo, believing only Rollo could fend off the Viking attack. King Charles pleaded with Rollo to protect Paris, even willing to kneel to him. Rollo, looking into the sincere eyes of the king, stated that he wouldn't betray the king, Paris, or his wife. What seemed like punishment to others appeared to be willingly accepted by Therese. In the pre-war council, Count Odo found himself being coldly ignored by the king of Paris. At this moment, he was very angry, so he began to speak rudely to Therese and even revealed his intention to usurp the throne. However, unknown to him, this confession would soon become his death warrant. Meanwhile, the Viking main force had already assembled and started moving up the Seine River. But Ragnar was eager to get the medicinal herbs on the way, so Yidu gave Ragnar the medicinal herbs. Not long after, he started hallucinating. He saw his hometown and saw familiar faces. And just when they were about to arrive in Paris, they saw a familiar figure. Rollo, with an indifferent expression, was on his horse, looking down at them. Whilst Ragnar had anticipated Rollo's betrayal, he was still unable to control his anger. However, as the leader of the Vikings, Ragnar's rationality overcame his impulses. He led everyone to set up camp and started discussing battle plans. Since the Parisians already knew their whereabouts, they decided to launch a direct attack. However, they needed to beware of the overhead defenses while passing the arrow towers, but this plan must be within Rollo's expectation. So, apart from the naval force, they required a ground troop to launch a surprise attack on the arrow towers from behind to divert their attention. Everybody agreed upon hearing this.
To attack by land also. Actions.
Lagertha volunteered to lead the ground detachment while Harald, unwilling to be outdone, volunteered to head the naval fleet. Thus, Ragnar declared that they would launch an attack on Paris the following day. After the council, Bjorn approached Erlendur to inquire about the owner of the ring. Unexpectedly, Erlendur blatantly denied any knowledge, but Torvi knew that it was her father Horik's ring. Since Lagertha was pregnant, Ragnar tried to persuade her to abstain from the battle. However, Lagertha rejected Ragnar's advice, stating that the seer had prophesied that she wouldn't have children anymore. Therefore, participating in the fight would not affect her. The next day, the Viking fleet headed towards Paris. The two Harald brothers looked particularly excited, and Floki was also on their boat. Soon they neared the Parisian arrow towers, with Rollo looking down emotionlessly at the crowd. Meanwhile, Lagertha led a team stealthily approaching their enemy. The Viking warships were getting closer to the arrow towers. Rollo reminded the soldiers not to rush to attack. He seemed to be waiting for something. As for Lagertha, they suddenly fell into a swamp as they approached the arrow tower and were unable to move for a while. Just as they struggled to move, Rollo spotted them. He immediately positioned his archers while Lagertha also noticed murderous intent from the arrow tower, but it was too late. Ragnar seemed to have caught the situation over there and immediately ordered an accelerated attack, successfully attracting some of the firepower. Seizing this opportunity, Lagertha led her troops to move left and set up their shields in preparation for a fierce attack. The Parisians also quickly adjusted their formation to confront them. The Viking archers supported their difficult advancement from behind the shields, but they had not expected Rollo to be well prepared. Another group of archers suddenly appeared behind them, and Lagertha was instantly surrounded by enemies from both sides. Facing heavy casualties, Lagertha had to order a retreat. At this moment, the naval fleet had also entered the range of the Frankish archers. Could they successfully?